Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you trusted completely? Someone whose family, bound by blood, and wondered if they're hiding a knife behind their back? I used to think that question was just for the movies. I used to believe that the foundation of family was built on unconditional trust, that kinship was the strongest shield against life's storms. I was wrong. Tragically wrong. Last week, I came back to this house, the family estate in Charleston, South Carolina, a place where the humid southern air always mingles with the sweet scent of magnolia blossoms, where history and heritage seem to whisper through every crack in the walls. We were here for the annual family reunion, a tradition that seemed unbreakable. Me, Chloe, the daughter who left the warmth of the South to chase tech dreams in Austin. My sister Olivia, the heart of the family, who stayed behind to preserve our traditional values. And Julian, Olivia's husband, the perfect son-in-law, a financial advisor with a polished smile that's almost too perfect and eyes that always hold something I could never quite decipher. I arrived as a CEO who just closed a $5 million seed funding round. To the world, it's just a number. But to me, it was sleepless nights, sweat, tears, and the future of 30 employees who put their full faith in me. I thought I was bringing good news home, proof that the rebellious daughter had made it. But just 48 hours later, I stood in this very room, staring into the face of betrayal. The $5 million was gone, completely, wiped from the company account. And Julian, the brother-in-law I tried to trust, just stood there, sipping an expensive glass of wine with a smug smile. This isn't theft, Chloe. His voice slithered, smooth and bone-chilling. This is wealth redistribution. That money should have belonged to this family, and that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when I looked at my sister, Olivia, and saw her nodding through tears. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "He did it to save us." Save us? By destroying everything I'd built? By putting 30 other families at risk of unemployment? In that moment, I realized I wasn't just facing a thief. I was up against a master manipulator, someone who'd turned my own sister into his ally. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd backed me into a corner, a naive tech CEO outsmarted by the schemes of the old world. But they made a fatal mistake. They didn't know that. Having suspected Julian for a long time, I didn't come home empty-handed. I brought a trap. A digital trap so sophisticated that even the best hackers would think twice. And I gave it a name, Project Chimera. In today's video, I'm not just going to tell you the story of the most horrific betrayal of my life. I'm going to show you, step by step, how I turned pain into a weapon, despair into a perfect revenge plan, and used my own technology to snare a wolf in sheep's clothing. If you've ever felt knocked down and believed there was no way out, stick around, because this is the story of how to turn the tables when you've lost everything. To understand how the trap was set, to see how every gear in that perfect revenge machine clicked into place, we have to go back in time. Not too far, just a few months before that fateful day at the Charleston estate. My relationship with my sister Olivia was like two parallel lines drawn on different maps. I chose the path of glass skyscrapers in Austin, of high-stakes funding rounds and a life fueled by caffeine and code. I believed in disruption, in carving out my own legacy instead of living in the shadow of the past. Olivia, on the other hand, chose to stay. She chose the tranquility of Charleston, the life of an artist with a small gallery, and immersed herself in the heritage I tried to escape. She was a pure, sensitive soul who believed in the beauty of things that never change, and that purity became her fatal flaw. Then Julian came into the picture. The first time Olivia brought Julian home to meet the family, he won everyone over. He had it all. The look of a Southern gentleman, a handshake that was almost too firm with confidence, and the ability to talk about complex finances in simple terms that made everyone feel smarter. He was a perfect actor, and my family was his stage. He called me the genius sister-in-law, but in his eyes, I always saw a cold calculation, an appraisal of assets rather than affection. My unease started with small things. The way he steered conversations, always circling back to money and his own success. The way Olivia, once lively and argumentative, grew quieter, always glancing at Julian for his reaction before speaking. Her smile lost its spontaneity. It became an accessory worn to please her husband. In our phone calls, I no longer heard my sister's voice. I only heard Julian's echo. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening, about 3 months before the reunion. Olivia called me, her voice thick with worry. She said a small investment Julian made for them had hit a snag. Her words were vague, clearly parroting Julian's. But what caught my attention was the unmasked fear in her voice when she said, "Julian says everything will be fine, as long as we trust his plan." Trust. That word rang in my head like an alarm bell. Right after that call, I did something I never thought I'd do. I crossed the line of family loyalty. I hired a private investigator. Part of me felt guilty, like a traitor snooping on my own sister's life. But the other part, the CEO trained to assess risks, was screaming that there was a serious security breach in my life, and its name was Julian. Cool. 2 weeks later, I received an encrypted dossier. What I read inside made my blood run cold. Julian wasn't just in a bit of trouble. He was drowning in debt, not ordinary credit card debt. These were 6-figure debts to a notorious black market lending outfit in Miami, the kind that doesn't settle disputes with lawyers. The report detailed shady meetings, assets quietly sold off, and a string of high-risk investment schemes that crashed spectacularly. Julian wasn't a brilliant investor. He was a gambler on a losing streak, willing to do anything to save himself. And I knew, with my company's $5 million funding round just splashed across financial headlines, I was no longer the genius sister-in-law in his eyes. I had become his biggest prey. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't call Olivia to warn her. I knew Julian had manipulated her too deeply. She wouldn't believe me. Instead, I called my company's cybersecurity director, a former NSA specialist. I told him, "I need you to build me a digital fortress around all my assets. But I don't want a wall. I want a trap. A trap so smart that the intruder won't know they're caught until it's too late." That was the night Project Chimera was born. A plan forged from potential betrayal, fueled by a leader's instinct, and armed with cutting-edge technology. I was no longer just a worried sister. I had become a hunter, patiently waiting for the beast to step into my crosshairs. And I knew the family reunion in Charleston would be the perfect hunting ground. As I drove through the wrought iron gates of the estate, a strange feeling washed over me. This place, with its ancient oaks and perfectly manicured lawns, still looked as peaceful as it did in my memories. But I no longer saw it through a child's eyes. Now, to me, every tree's shadow could be a hiding spot. Every closed window felt like a pair of watching eyes. I wasn't here for a family reunion. I was here to hunt. Julian was the first to greet me, just as I expected. He wore a crisp white linen shirt, looking relaxed and polished. He spread his arms wide and gave me a hug that felt more like an appraisal than affection. His hand patted my back, a seemingly friendly gesture, but to someone on high alert, it was almost like a search. "Chloe, great to have you back," he said, his voice warm as honey. "The whole family's been looking forward to this. You're bringing some big city energy to this quiet old place." Behind him, Olivia rushed out, her smile bright but fragile. She threw her arms around me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt her sincerity. But then she quickly glanced at Julian, as if seeking his approval. The performance began before I even stepped out of the car. That night's dinner was a masterfully staged psychological gauntlet. Aunt Carol peppered me with questions about my work, laced with curiosity and skepticism. Uncle David tried to steer the conversation to safer topics like fishing or the weather, but Julian always knew how to pull the spotlight back to himself and aim it at me. "You've got to be careful, Chloe," he said, deftly slicing his steak. "That tech world, it's like a giant bubble. One day you're a millionaire on paper, the next you're broke. It's not solid like real estate or true family values." He said that last part while giving Olivia a pointed look. My sister just stared down at her plate. The table fell silent. I gave a smile, one I'd rehearsed hundreds of times in boardroom meetings. "Thanks for the concern, Julian, but I believe in risks that are carefully calculated." Right then, under the table, the smartwatch on my wrist buzzed faintly, inaudible to anyone else. I discreetly glanced down. A small line of text flashed on a black background. "Intrusion attempt. Level 1. Port scan. Blocked. Source. Local device." The game had officially begun. A cold surge of adrenaline shot through me, but my face didn't betray a thing. Julian had made his move, faster than I expected. Desperation makes people reckless. He was in the same house as me, trying to break into my company's network from his own device. After dinner, I excused myself, claiming exhaustion, and headed to my room. My childhood bedroom was unchanged, but now it was my command center. I locked the door, sat down, and opened my laptop. The Project Chimera interface lit up, a complex yet elegant map of defensive architecture. I could see the traces of his recent attack, an amateur attempt, easily stopped by the first layer of defense. I smiled. Julian wasn't a professional hacker. He was just a desperate man backed into a corner. And that was exactly what I needed. I logged into the system and made a critical adjustment. I lowered the outer firewall, leaving only passive monitoring sensors. I was opening the door for him. I needed him to believe he'd found a vulnerability, a way in. I needed him to walk through the door I'd left ajar, straight into the heart of my trap. I went to bed with an oddly calm feeling. I knew that while I slept, a multi-million-dollar digital heist would unfold. I knew that Julian, in another room of this house, was feeling like the smartest man alive, silently celebrating his victory. The next morning, I woke up as the sun rose. I brewed a cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch, breathing in the fresh morning air. Everything felt almost too normal. Then, with deliberately trembling hands, I opened my company's banking app on my phone. And there it was, a stark, cold zero. Balance. Over $5 million, gone. For a moment, even knowing this was part of the plan, my heart clenched. Seeing the fruits of my labor erased by a single zero was devastatingly powerful. But I quickly steadied myself. I took a deep breath. I had to play my part perfectly. The horror, the panic, the despair, it all had to feel real. I walked into the kitchen, where the family was gathered, and let my phone slip from my hands, clattering loudly on the tile floor. Every eye turned to me. My performance was about to begin. Everything froze. Uncle David lowered his newspaper. Aunt Carol set her coffee mug down hard, the sharp clink cutting through the room. Olivia turned, her eyes wide, genuine worry etched across her face. Only Julian stayed calm, leaning against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed, looking like a spectator waiting for a good show. Chloe? What's wrong, honey? Uncle David spoke first, his voice full of concern. I bent down to pick up my phone, my hands trembling just right. I looked up, making sure everyone could see the panic in my eyes. The money. I stammered, my voice breaking. The entire funding round for my company. $5 million. It's gone. The account shows a zero balance. What? Aunt Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I told you, that tech business is too risky. It's gotta be some hackers. Olivia rushed to my side, grabbing my arm. Calm down, Chloe. It could just be a glitch. Have you called the bank? I shook my head, struggling to breathe. It's not a glitch, Liv. The system shows a massive transfer went through at 3 a.m. It says the transaction came from a device right here in this house. My words hung in the air. The mood shifted from worry to suspicion. Eyes darted around the room. That's when Julian stepped forward, his face full of feigned concern. That's unbelievable, Chloe. Absolutely awful, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. There's a thief in our own home. Have you called the police yet? We need to report this right away. He was playing his part too well. But this was my moment. I turned and locked eyes with him. The panic in my gaze slowly faded, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. Julian, did you use a computer last night? I had a feeling someone was in my room while I was asleep. Julian blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. But he quickly regained his composure. He let out a cold, mocking laugh. Oh, I see how it is, he said, his smile still plastered on. You don't think it's hackers. You think it's me. He clapped his hands slowly, dripping with sarcasm. So the real face of the successful sister-in-law finally comes out. Always suspicious, always thinking someone's out to take what's yours. He took a step toward me, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You're right, I took the money, but you're too naive, Chloe. This isn't theft, it's wealth redistribution. That money should have belonged to this family, to make up for the years Olivia went without while you were busy building your empire. What are you saying? I snapped, real anger starting to surge. He's telling the truth, Chloe. Olivia sobbed beside me, each word stabbing like a knife. Julian did it for us. He used that money to pay off an old debt, to save us from dangerous people. He's a hero. Julian smirked, the grin of a victor. He spread his arms wide as if embracing the world. See? I saved your sister from forces you'll never understand. A debt from past mistakes, and I used your resources to clean it up. You should be thanking me. What a touching story. A defense built on manipulation and lies. He'd painted himself as the victim, the hero, and he thought he'd won. That's when I stopped acting. The trembling stopped. The tears dried. I stood tall, looked straight at Julian, and for the first time that day, I smiled. A real smile. Great story, Julian. You're a hell of an actor, I said, my voice now calm and clear, echoing through the room. My sudden shift threw him off. The smile on his face froze. But you forgot one thing, I continued. I'm not an artist. I'm an engineer. I don't believe in stories. I believe in data. And you, Julian, left behind way too much data. What are you talking about? I'm saying you didn't take a single cent. My company's $5 million is still safe in a multi-layered encrypted wallet. The bank account you saw, the one with the zero balance, was just a trap. A decoy account I set up. Julian's face began to change, from smug to confused, then slowly to fear. When you scanned my network last night, I explained clearly, my system didn't block you. It recognized you and opened a fake pathway. It led you to a perfect replica of the banking system, a virtual playground built just for you. And while you were busy transferring money from a dummy account, my real system, Project Chimera, recorded everything. Every click, every keystroke, your IP address, your device's serial number, even footage of you captured by a hidden camera I installed in my room. I held up my phone, and that entire data package, undeniable proof of your federal-level fraud, was automatically sent to a very special friend of mine at the FBI 5 minutes ago. I stared into Julian's wide, horrified eyes. Project Chimera, I said, my voice ice cold. Activated. Instantly, the smart TV in the living room flared to life, displaying crisp video of Julian sneaking around my room. The smart speaker on the kitchen counter began playing a recording of his voice muttering a password. A piercing alarm suddenly blared from the house's security system, deafening and unstoppable. And then, the sound we all heard in the opening of this story rang out. Bam! The front door of the estate burst open. FBI task force agents, fully geared, stormed in, their boots pounding on the ancient oak floors. Julian Rhodes, a commanding voice boomed, "Freeze! You're under arrest!" The chaos unfolded and ended in mere minutes, but it felt like a century. Julian didn't go quietly. He screamed, thrashed, spewing denials and curses. As the agents cuffed him, his smugness vanished, replaced by the raw panic of a cornered animal. His final glare wasn't at me. It was at Olivia. A look laced with venom. "You'll never get away from me, Liv." "You're mine," he roared before being dragged out of the house, leaving behind a chilling silence. In that silence, I heard something more painful than Julian's shouts. It was Olivia's absolute stillness. My sister didn't cry or scream. She stood frozen, like a statue, her face blank. The entire world she'd trusted, the husband she'd fiercely defended, had crumbled to ash before her eyes. It wasn't a loud pain. It was a quiet collapse from within. When the last police car door slammed shut and a false calm settled over the estate, Aunt Carol broke the silence, but her words weren't for Olivia. They were for me. Chloe, her voice trembled with anger. "How could you do this? Bringing the police into our home? You've shamed this entire family. We handle things behind closed doors." I looked at her, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. "I protected this family from a criminal, Aunt Carol. Sometimes the truth matters more than appearances." "The truth?" She shot back. "The truth is your sister's broken die, and you're standing here like a judge. This isn't how we solve problems." The argument might have dragged on, but Uncle David stood up. His usually kind face was now hard with anger and disappointment. He pulled a piece of paper from his wallet. "Carol, this is my retirement account statement," he said, his voice low and firm. "Look at this. 3 months ago, someone tried to transfer $20,000 out. The transaction failed because I had two-factor authentication enabled. I thought it was a bank error at the time, but the IP address for that transaction, after having it checked, I found out it came from a coffee shop right near Julian's office." Aunt Carol froze. What are you saying?" "He targeted all of us," Uncle David said, his gaze sweeping the room. "He saw this family as a gold mine. Chloe didn't destroy this family. She just saved us from a vulture." The weight of the truth finally crushed all resistance. That night, no one slept. The house sank into the silence of belated realizations and fresh emotional wounds. The weeks and months that followed were a long journey of rebuilding. As I predicted, the evidence from Project Chimera was ironclad. Julian and the entire black market lending ring behind him were dismantled. He faced a lengthy sentence for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes. Justice was served, cold and precise as a line of code. My company, instead of collapsing, came back stronger than ever. The story of Project Chimera somehow leaked to the tech media. We didn't just recover the money, we earned recognition for a groundbreaking cybersecurity system. Investors didn't just return, they brought others with them. Mitchell Designs became a symbol of resilience and innovation. But the greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom or on the stock market. It was in my home in Austin. Olivia moved in with me. Those first weeks were tough. She was quiet, plagued by nightmares. She was detoxing from the most dangerous drug of all, psychological manipulation. We went to therapy together. There were good days and bad days. But slowly, I started to see my sister again. Her first real smile came when we baked the cake Mom used to make. The light in her artist's eyes returned when she started painting again. 6 months later, Olivia used her inheritance to start a small nonprofit, providing legal and psychological support for victims of financial abuse in relationships. She turned her scars into a shield for others. Today, looking back, I realized the biggest lesson wasn't about technology or money. It was about trust. The phrase trust but verify has become my guiding principle. Protect your digital assets as fiercely as you lock your front door. Because in the modern world, the line between the two barely exists. But more than that, this story is about finding strength in the ashes. Betrayal doesn't define you, how you rise from it does. We redefined our family, not by blood, but by respect, by healthy boundaries, and by a willingness to protect each other from the darkness, whether it comes from outside or lurks within. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from nothing, or stood by a loved one through their healing, share your story in the comments below. Because every story of resilience told is a torch, lighting the way for those still walking in the dark. Thank you for listening.